Hey there, today I want to share this round midnight arrangement that I've made. Well, I shouldn't say that, I haven't made it myself. It's based off what's in this book, the Thelonious Monk Fake Book. Really good fake book for monk tunes, like 70 tunes in here. So I just took the arrangement or the transcription from this book and applied it to the guitar. So I'll show you the arrangement, and also during this video, I will talk about how to make a solo guitar arrangement. Somebody asked me if I could go over how I go about doing that. So some ideas on things you have to consider when you're trying to play what's essentially a piano piece for the guitar, or arranging a jazz tune for the guitar. So I'll talk a little bit about this book. I'll talk about that, how to come up with an arrangement and how to perform an arrangement. And also we'll talk about this tune Round Midnight. In the previous video I talked about all the different variations on the changes. There seems to be so many conflicting chord changes. So in this case, we're actually looking at the original changes, at least of one of his recordings of this tune Round Midnight. So I think this is a very accurate, the transcriptions, the chord changes are very accurate. So a lot of times people, when they play this tune, they don't play the changes that the original changes. They've made changes that came later. So enough talking, let's get started, shall we? So let's skip the intro for now. I'll start with the A section. I always recommend obviously learn the melody first. Then try to play it with bass notes. So right off the bat there we have a chromatic bass line. Then A flat. That's the first two bars. Like already there's a lot of information that sometimes that's all you need, the bass and the melody. So a couple of things to think about. If I'm playing it like that, I'm playing it very strict as it's written on the page there. But that's not necessarily how you play it. You probably phrase it somehow. So you need to learn how to do that, because you don't want the bass to be... The bass should be even, right? That's kind of tricky to do. So you might want to spend some time with figuring out how to do that. Unless you're gonna play it completely rubato, then it doesn't matter that much. Also, you don't need to play that D, I don't think. You could ignore it. Then let's add some chords. I don't actually need to play a chord on the first beat, but I could, and then I would play E flat minor, maybe a triad, like an open triad. Here I can play this chord. Here it's a C diminished. That's actually what Monk played, at least in this recording. A flat minor, D flat 7. So the diminished chord, most people don't play that, but that's really interesting. So E flat, some kind of triad minor chord. And then this chord, which is a G flat major 7 in the drop 3, second inversion, I think. Diminished. Here I can just play the guide tones, I don't have to play the bass notes. Or bass notes. Then C minor 7 flat 5. Here a lot of people play F7 there, but apparently that's not what Monk did. He just played the C minor 7 flat 5. Also, a lot of people play E flat minor there, so... But E flat minor 6 and C minor 7 flat 5 are the same notes. They're the same notes, just different inversions, right? So you could think of that C minor 7 flat 5 there, that it's actually a E flat minor 6. And then you have the chromatic 2 5s. So here I choose to play this because I couldn't come up with an interesting... If I just play a minor 7 flat 5 chord there, it's not satisfying. There's something not satisfying about that. So I added this minor second to make it a little bit more gnarly. So those were that's my idea. Then we have this chromatic 2 5s. Here I'm doing the Chord Rosenwinkel thing. I'm playing the root in the 7th. Right? Root 7th. Root 7th of B minor 7. The root in the 7th of E7. The root 7th of B flat minor. And with the melody. So the reason I'm doing that is instead of playing guide tones, it's redundant when the melody note already is a guide tone. The guide tones obviously being the 3rd and 7th. When the melody note is one of the guide tones, it's better to play root and 7th. And with Kurt Rosenwinkel, I mean there's this video of him playing Body and Soul where he talks about playing the root and the 7th under the melody. I've talked about that video in the past as well. Same thing here, right? It's very strict. You might want to play... Then we have an A flat minor. D flat 7, same thing, I'm playing root and 7th because that's a guide tone. So even though that might seem like a really spread out funny voicing, it sounds good. Then we have E flat minor. So I struggled with coming up with an interesting chord here. Decided on an open triad. So that's an E flat minor open triad, first inversion, where you could double the root. You could play it here. Again, do you want to play the chord at the same time or after the melody note? And then A flat 7, flat 5. C minor 7 flat 5, B flat 7 flat 5 to B flat 7. Here, Monk clearly plays some kind of dominant flat 5 chord. B flat 7 flat 5, like a whole tone sound that he often did. I like to do this chord here. So that's an E7 triad over B flat, with B flat on top. So that's an altered chord. It's like a flat 5, flat 9, right? Love that arpeggio, like an E triad with a B flat. I stole that from Jesse van Ruler. He plays that all the time. So a couple of things to think about. When there's a chord by itself, that's one thing. And sometimes the chord is supporting a melody note, But in the beginning, you're playing a chord. But here, you're playing a chord under the melody. Two completely different scenarios. When the chord is by itself, you can do more. You can make it a big chord, like a minor major 7. Here too, you could play something fancier. And the A flat. There too, you could play something really hip there, like a whole tone chord. However, for me, I find that when you play those big chords, the minor, major 9, if it's too much, it gets a little bit too much. You can do it maybe every now and then, but if you do it all the time, the tune is already kind of complex. It's a lot of harmony. So it's actually better to play something really simple like a triad. The older I get, I guess, or the more I do this, I find that I tend to be more drawn to triads and stuff like that, rather than this big fancy. Another thing to consider is what you're giving. You don't want to give away the melody note. If I play this, for example, I put the G flat on top, the next note I'm going to play, the next important note is that G flat, so I've already given it to the listener. It's a little bit redundant. You know what I mean? But if I instead don't play it, or if I play it disguised, then I'm introducing that note there instead of giving it away in the beginning, if you know what I mean. So you could play a fifth, like a power chord. Kurt Rosenwinkel plays power chords all the time, so it's okay. You can play it even though it's jazz. You could do this, play like a G flat major 7 here. Sounds like an E flat minor 9. Then it's the same thing. You might want to add some variation to it, right? Second ending. So those chords are, you don't have to do much there because it's already very user-friendly with a melody note on top of the chords. C minor 7 flat 5, B flat 7 flat 5, A flat over B flat, then E flat major. So E flat major 6. I'm not a big fan of that chord. I'm not a big fan of that sound there. So all I did is I changed the bass note to a fifth. You could play the major 7, but it doesn't really work that great there because you're obscuring the melody. Again, do you play the chord after the melody note or at the same time? Two different feelings. Also, as I mentioned, you might want to add some variation the second time you play the A section. So you could change the time feel. You could play it more rubato the first time. And the second time, maybe add a more pulse, like a steady pulse. To create variation when you play these chords, for example, I could play them as triplets. Or even. Because there's no rhythm section, so I can extend the time, I can do whatever I want. Also, certain chords, you could stay on them, like the last chord, obviously. There's no rhythm section so you could wait as long as you want. So I'm basically playing what's in here, except those chromatic 2 5s. The chords that Monk play there are F7, B flat 7 sus, B flat minor, to A7 flat 5. So F7 there. That's crazy. Nobody plays that. So there I decided it's maybe better to play the chords that most people play. He also plays this melody. That melody, he plays like with minor third, which is a little bit weird, right? But I decided not to do that. So when you're playing Monk tunes, it's tempting to kind of wanting to fix his chords, because a lot of times the chord changes don't make sense. This makes way more sense than, right? But so sometimes I think it's a good idea to kind of play the chords that make more sense, but other times it's better to let it stay what he intended, because if you try to fix Monk's tunes, the magic disappears. If you've seen the comedy videos by Hans Groener, I think the comedy character is, where this piano player is trying to fix his music, then it's a terrible idea. So, but again, sometimes it's actually better to play the chords that everybody plays, rather than being obsessed with the original changes.
And now my interpretation of Monk's Well You Needn't. I think you will like it as much as I know I will.
Now the B section is where it's get a little bit even more confusing. So I'll play the B section: C minor 7 flat 5, B7, root and 7. Here I play that chord again, the E triad. Could be this. Very cool altered chord. A flat minor, root and 7, melody note. And then I play the guide tones: F minor, going to B flat, C minor 7 flat 5, F13, no roots, D flat 7, or 9 with a 9th on top, C flat, A flat minor 7, and then back to A section. So this part is a no-brainer. I like to do this. There's a minor second here, right? Or a major second. I like to do the tritone. Sounds very monk. Like that. So the changes that people often play, as I mentioned in my previous video, are A flat minor, F split, B flat, E flat minor, C split. So that's very similar to what's actually here, right? And then people play E flat 7, D flat, C flat, B flat. That makes more sense, or they added the relative to 5, so B flat minor, E flat 7, A flat minor, F sharp, B, F. So instead of going to D flat, people go to E flat. I think anytime I've played this tune, I've never played those changes that I showed you. It's always been the E flat, D flat. I don't think I've ever been on a gig or a jam session where people played the changes I'm talking about here that actually are from the tune. So imagine if half the band is playing E flat 7 and the other half of the band are playing D flat. It's gonna clash, it's not gonna work. That's why in this case it might be better to play the chords that are actually the chords that people play rather than trying to obsessively stay true to the original. So you might want to ask the musicians beforehand, like, which changes are we going to play? But it's nice to play these chords because, again, if you try to fix his music too much, the magic disappears. So there are a few tunes like that where people actually don't play the original changes in your own sweet way. It's another tune like that where people play the Miles Davis changes. So if I were to play this, I wouldn't necessarily play a solo concert. I would be kind of scared to do that, but sometimes I could play like a solo piece in a concert, but I wouldn't do a whole concert by myself. That would be kind of scary. It's not my forte. But if I were to play this tune in front of an audience, I would think about when to play rubato, usually start rubato, and then maybe the B section I would add more time, and which chords I could stay on. Obviously the last chord you want to... That's where people stretch. Right? So you could decide on where I want to do the fermata and where to add some time. So maybe the B section. So I'm imagining I'm playing with a swing. Maybe go back to rubato. Or if you're brave, you could leave it open and see how the audience responds when you're deciding. But you could also decide, have like a plan on how you're gonna perform it. I think it's a good idea, if you're not super experienced live performer, to have a specific roadmap on how you're gonna play it. You could also kind of extend the melody, like for example, when it goes to, you could add more notes. especially when you introduce the melody. First you want to play the melody as it is, but then when you've done that, the audience already heard the melody. Most people are probably familiar with the tune anyway, so you can add more variation to it. But you want to also at some point play the melody as it is, for me anyway, because if you never play the melody, if you're constantly changing things, then you might lose whoever is listening. So this arrangement is on my Patreon page. As always, big thank you to my patrons. So I'll just play the intro. The intro is not from the book. This is just what like the normal intro that most people play. So A minor 755 to a D altered. So there's 70 monk tunes in this book. I'm gonna do a little bit more. I'm gonna cover one more tune, I think, from this book and do the same thing. There's also footnotes at the end with. There's a discography, and there's a lot of stuff here. And wow, he recorded a lot. And some footnotes on specific rhythms and things that Monk does in these tunes, because it's not enough with just the melody and the chord changes. Sometimes there's specific things that he does that you kind of need to be aware of when you're playing the tune for it to work. And it's not necessarily, the real book is not satisfying in that sense, doesn't give you all that information that you need. Obviously, you should listen to Monk and try to figure out, but it can be very difficult because it's not clear. It's very much not clear what the hell he's doing. Sometimes he doesn't seem to know himself what he's actually playing. It can be very vague, the harmony.
D flat.
Yeah, G flat.
G.
D.
D flat.
D.
D flat. That means my E flat. E flat what? D flat what?
D flat 7.
D flat 7. Then think about right here. G minor 7 to D flat.
Yeah.
G minor 7. G minor 7. A minor 7. To what? To D flat. That's 2 beats of E's.
Yeah.
And then next bar.
The next half of the bar is
Yeah.
G flat 7.
Huh?
G flat 7.
D flat 7.
G flat.
G flat. G flat. G flat.
Yeah, as you can see there, it's far from clear what is going on. So I think it's absolutely necessary to study Monk's music if you are a serious jazz player, because I don't think jazz would sound the same today if it wasn't for him. He kind of set the standard for what jazz improvisation is. And you don't have to become an expert and know every tune and know everything, but to some level, some degree, you need to study his music. I wish I had done more of that earlier on, and that would have saved me quite a lot of time. So if you want to do that, this book, The Thelonious Monk Fake Book, Hal Leonard Publishing, very, very good stuff. I'm playing through this book. There's a lot of tunes that I've obviously played before, and there are changes and things that I wasn't aware of. And then there's tunes that have to be honest, I've never heard them. So it's it's a fun journey to work through this book. So Round Midnight arrangement is on my Patreon page, and this was the book for the day. And have a good one, and I shall see you next time.